Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here.
Nice to see you.
Let me ask you, do you believe it's a good idea to cut Medicaid to provide tax cuts for the wealthy?
Again, we have no intention of cutting Medicaid.
I'm asking you as an idea. As an idea, do you believe that it is a good idea to cut Medicaid to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy?
That's not the intent of cutting Medicaid.
So is your answer yes, no?
No, my comment is it's...
Well, whether or not it's your intent, do you believe, we're talking about, the administration also sets policy views. So your deferral is amazing, but the administration sets policy views. Does the administration believe that it is a good idea to cut Medicaid to pay tax cuts for the wealthy?
What are you referring to in the tax cuts for the wealthy?
Well, certainly, let's take the Mnuchin rule.
So are you referring to the taxes as part of Obamacare, because which we heard earlier, many of those taxes hit. Well,
I'm referring to what the House Republican health care bill does, because it cuts nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid. And it rips away health care from the most vulnerable in our society, and it hands the money over to the most privileged in our country.
I don't share your view that it hands the money over to the most privileged.
But you share the view that it cuts nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid.
Again, it scales back the growth of Medicaid.
It scales back. It cuts nearly $1 trillion. You call that scaling back? I guess on Wall Street, $1 trillion is nothing.
No,
but here in the lives of real people, it's something.
Senator, I appreciate your comments. The $1 trillion is obviously a lot of money. I realize that I'm happy to talk about the tax aspect of. Well,
let me ask you this.
But the other areas are out of my domain.
Let me ask you this: will the president adhere to his own budget and only sign a tax reform bill that doesn't increase the debt? Yes or no?
Again, I think the president will look at when there is an overall tax reform bill that can pass the House and the Senate. The president, who has always said he's willing to negotiate.
So he might sign one that increases the debt. Is what you're saying? That's a possibility.
What I'd say is that the president always has said that he's willing to negotiate on these issues, and he'll make a decision, and I will make a recommendation when we have an overall bill.
I know, but the question is there's no policy standards here. You want us to judge in the absence of any executive policy standards. It's all very nebulous. I understand negotiation, but at the end of the day, there has to be some standards. Let me ask you this. Will the president commit himself to your own Mnuchin rule and not sign a tax reform bill that cuts taxes on the top 1%?
The president is very concerned about the debt and wants to have plans to pay down the debt, and the president is very focused that there is a middle-income tax cut as part of this.
Well, if you sign a bill that actually permits debt to take place, then that concern isn't that great. Let me ask you this. Will the president sign a tax reform bill that doesn't cut taxes for all families earning under $100,000?
It is not his intent to do that. He wants a middle-income tax cut.
Not his intent. So does that mean no, he will not?
I can't speak for the president on what he.
Well, you advise him. Would you advise him not to
sign such a bill? I would advise him that, and we will make sure that there are tax cuts in this process for the middle class.
Will the president sign a bill that gives more tax cuts as a percentage of income to the top 1% than the middle class?
Again, I am not going to go through a bunch of hypothetical scenarios of what the president will do and what the president won't do. I'm happy to explain what the president's objectives are, and we are moving through a process.
Let me ask you these. Maybe these will have greater clarity. Will the president sign a tax reform bill that creates a new surtax for millionaires to show up Medicare, I should say?
I don't believe that's in the current plan.
So that would be a no.
I said,
will the president sign a tax reform bill that increases the estate tax?
I do not believe that's in the current plan.
So that would be a no then. Will the president sign a tax reform bill that doesn't cut taxes on large corporations?
The president wants to make sure that we have a competitive business system. And for many large companies, they pay substantially less than the 35%. So our intent
is to
lower the rate
the answer to that is
broaden
no.
the base.
The answer to that is no. So you've answered pretty clear definitively. Couldn't answer yes or no on everything else, but pretty definitively that on those things, it paints a pretty clear picture of what his priorities would be. He'll sign a bill that explodes the debt, leaves middle-class families in the cold, breaks the Mnuchin rule by cutting taxes for the top 1%, but he won't sign a bill unless it includes a giveaway to large multinational corporations.
Senator, in all due respect, okay, that's not what I said, and that's not.
Well, no, you didn't say that specifically, but your line of question and answers give me that. Let me just say the final thing. I don't get, this sounds like Enron-type accounting. The Trump budget has virtually no details on tax reform. Yet it assumes that their non-existing plan will create an additional $2 trillion in revenue. It uses an imaginary revenue to plug an all-too-real hole in the deficit. Because besides the problem of counting your chickens before they hatch, the administration also assumes that same $2 trillion in imaginary dollars will be used to offset tax cuts. So my question is, how did the administration estimate the macroeconomic effects of tax reform without knowing any of the specifics of tax reform, including whether and how revenue deductions would be offset?
I'm sorry you weren't here earlier, but I answered similar questions several times already, and that we didn't have the details to put in the impact of taxes. We have complete transparency.
You don't have any details today?
So we're going to have to wrap
well, I finalize, Mr. Chairman. So you don't have any details. And so if you don't have any details of what it will look like, I don't know how you do such macroeconomic forecasting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.